Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. So we are going to go over infinite scrolling, and I'm going to show you how we can implement this just using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and having a backend setup, which will have Node.js with Express and a local DB, which will be using MySQL. So let me give you a brief demo of how this will work. So when the page loads, we'll have a loading text there, and as we scroll down, we'll have that loading text pop up again, and we'll keep loading more posts. So these are just sample posts that I'm getting from this API, right? JSON placeholder. We're actually going to grab that data and we're going to store it into our local database, and then we're going to get all the data from our database. And this will keep going until all the data is received from our database. So this is a pretty neat way of implementing pagination. So let's jump right into Visual Studio Code and I'll show you how to get it done. Okay, I got VS Code open here along with my browser, and I created a current project folder, and I'm just in that directory, and I have my gitbash terminal open here. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our packages, and I also wanted to mention that we will be getting our data from JSON placeholder, and we're going to be storing that into our database. So first, let's actually set up our database. So I'm going to open xampp, and if you guys are installing it for the first time, you want to press this start and start the Apache and MySQL, and you'll want to click on admin here, and it will load the phpMyAdmin webpage. And I'm going to extend this out. So the first thing that we're going to do is get the data from JSON placeholder. We're going to get these 100 posts, and we're going to just store that in our DB. So if you're wondering why we're doing that, I just want to make this tutorial focus more on getting data from the database and implementing infinite scrolling that way instead of using an API, because this would follow more closely to real world practice and how you guys would be implementing this. All right, so we have phpMyAdmin here. And the side menu, these are all the databases I have. So if you don't have one created, you want to you'll want to create a new database. And I have a tutorials database right here. So you guys can just copy that and just click on the create button. So I'm going to go to my tutorials database. And I already have a post table, so I'm just going to drop it real fast. So we're going to create a table called post. Okay, so right here, I'm going to call this post, and we're going to have 3 columns in here. So if you look here, we're only going to store the title and body, and then we'll have our own ID that gets auto-incremented. Okay, so I'm going to click go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to have here is ID. And this is going to be auto-incremented. So if I scroll to the right, and this is going to also be our primary key. Okay, and then we're going to have a title and a body. And this is going to be a length of 11. And this is going to be varchar or varchar, however you pronounce it. And this will be the same with 255. And if you just hit save, that'll create the table for us, and we have our post table where we can start inserting our data. So before we go on to the code, if you guys click on this home button here and you go to user accounts, if you guys don't have a user account created, I would probably create one. I have this n² one right here, so you can just click on new user account, and if you just go to edit privileges after, what you can do is you can click on database, and I have already privileges to tutorials. You'll just want to find it and then click on go and then add all the privileges, and you should have access to the database. So I'm going to keep this login information open because we'll need that for the database settings. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of send this back. And I'm going to close out of these because we don't need that. All right, so I'm going to create 2 folders here, a client folder and a server folder, so that there is no confusion. Okay, so I'm going to close the sidebar. I'm going to cd into the server. We're going to start on the server side and save all the posts in our database. So I'm going to cd into server and I'm going to install all the packages that we need. So we need to install Express. Oh, before I do that, we need to create our package.json file. So I'm going to do npm init-y. Okay, so our package file, package.json is open. And all right, so you'll be able to see all the packages that we install here. So we're going to install Express, the Express framework. Okay, so now we have Express installed. We will install the next package here, which is going to be Axios. So we're going to need that to make API call to JSON placeholder through the Express framework. All right, and the next thing we need is the MySQL package that works really well with the Express framework. All right, and then the next thing we need is .env to store all of our database information to connect to it. And I think the last thing we need one more. We need to install cores so that we can make API requests to our backend. Let me explain that more clearly. So that we can make API requests using fetch from the client-side JavaScript to the backend. All right, and one more thing we're going to install is nodemon, which is a dev dependency that we'll install it as, so that we don't have to restart the server every time we make a change in our code. Okay, so I'm going to just put this side by side here, and I'm going to minimize this a little. All right, so in our server, we are going to create a .env file, and we are going to store our database information. So we're going to say db user equal to, so here I created my user account that I have already, n squared, db password, which is coding, I believe, and then we have db host, and we also have db port before I forget. Okay, so the host is going to be localhost right here, and then the port, you can just see that from right here, 3306. And then we also have the database in case you have several, and that is tutorials. All right, so I'm going to minimize that. And then also one more is the server port to start our Express server, which will do 5,000. All right, so we won't need our .env file unless we need to reference it. Okay, so in our server.json, I'm going to create a db.js script. Okay, and I'm going to place the db.js script inside the server folder. And now we are going to call the MySQL package by using the require statement. And then we're going to say const connection. We're going to create our connection here by saying MySQL.create connection. And this takes in arguments of all the database information that we need from .env. And we're going to also include the .env package. And we're going to say .env.config. Okay, so here we're going to say user, and this is going to be process.env.db_user. And I'm just going to have this copied so that we can paste it in the other settings. I'm going to have password, and this will be password. We're going to have host, and this will be just host. And then we're going to have port. This will be port. And then lastly, I believe we're going to have database. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to I'm going to connect to the database. So I'm going to say database.connect. Okay, this takes in a callback function, and it takes a parameter of error. And we're going to say if error is true, we're just going to console.log the error, and return. Otherwise, let's console.log saying we're connected to the DB. All right, so let's give that a try. I'm in the server directory, so I can just say nodemon db. And it looks like, oh, I typed in connection, but yeah, looks like we're connected. Okay, so I'm gonna exit out of that by pressing Control C. And if I'm gonna create a class here, a DB class, so that we can grab the instance anytime we need it. So we're gonna say static get DB instance. And I'm going to create a variable up here called instance and set that equal to null. And in the static function, I'm going to say return instance using a ternary operator. If instance is not null, return the instance. Otherwise, create a new DB object and return that. And I'm going to create another function called get connection. And I'm going to say, I'm just simply going to return the connection variable. All right. So that's it for the DB. I'm going to just leave that open and to the side for now. Let's create our script that will insert the post to our database. So I'm going to include here Axios. Okay, I'm also going to include DB. And I believe that's it. Oh, yeah, that's it. Okay, and I'm going to create a function called insert post into DB. Okay, so we're going to grab the DB connection. Let's create a variable called DB instance equal to DB dot get. Oh, so this should autocomplete, but the reason it's not, I always catch myself by that, is because we're not exporting the DB class. Module.exports is equal to DB. So now if I go back, yep, there we go. And we're also going to create a variable called connection to grab the DB connection. And I'm going to say get connection. Okay. All right, so now we have the DB connection. So before all that, we can keep that at top. We also need to get the data. So using Axios, we can this will be our URL. And this is going to be an array format that we get it in. So we're going to loop through it and create our query to do a batch insert to insert it once into the database using one query. Okay. So we will say const response equal to axios.get and the URL I'm just going to pass. Okay. And now the response is going to, let's just console.log it so you guys can see. And let me call this function. Okay, so now I'm going to run nodemon insert post. Oh, db.getConnection is not a function. That is because I need to be using the DB instance. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we get a promise back. Oh, yeah, so we get a promise back. I wanted to make this an async await function. All right, so you can see here we get the data. One thing I want to show you is if I can go to the top of where it starts, we gotta access this data key to grab the actual post, the response data. So I'm going to create another variable down here saying data is equal to response.data. And let's have a better name for that. I'm going to say post. All right. So now we can create our query. So I'm going to create a string and I'm going to say post.forEach Okay, so we're gonna have post. We'll also have an index, which is just gonna be the index of the array key. All right, so we're gonna say query plus minus. Oh, let's start with the initial query. We're gonna do an insert into post, and we're gonna use the parentheses to only insert what we want. So if I go to this table, I'm gonna close out of that. If I go to SQL here, just want to show you guys that we can just use these parentheses, say, okay, we're only going to be inserting values into the title and body. And we're going to say values, and we'll fill in the rest in the for each loop. So I'm going to use template string here, and I'm going to put it in quotes, and so I'm going to start it with the open and close parenthesis. Okay, so it's going to be post, and I shouldn't call this post. I should call it post. Dot title, comma, open close quotes, post dot body. All right, and we need an if condition here, because if you want to do multiple values, you need to have a comma at each one at the end, and then followed by the ending, which is a semicolon. So we're going to say if index plus 1 is not equal to post, so we're going to get the length of the data array. So we're going to say post length is equal to post.length. All right. Okay, so if it's not equal to that, we are going to add a comma to the query string. All right, and then at the end of this, we're just going to add a semicolon. Okay, so let's just console.log our query to make sure that it looks good at the end. All right, so as you can see, it ends with the semicolon, and we got our commas. So let's go ahead and insert this data. So I'm going to say connection.query. Okay, this is going to be a function that takes the first parameter at the query string with a callback, and this is going to be an error and results. Okay, so now in our query, we are going to insert that, and we'll have a callback, and we're going to say if error console.log error and return. Otherwise, let's console.log the results. Okay, so that's it. And as you guys can see here, that we got our insert ID. So let's see if the data got inserted. Perfect. We have our data now, and we can get started with our Express app. So I'm also going to create a app.js file here for our Express, and on our package.json, I'm going to replace the main with app.js. The reason I'm doing this is because we're going to have a index.js in our client side. So I'm going to create 3 files here: index.html, style.css, and index.js. So I'm going to set up the backend before I go into setting up the HTML. So we're going to include Express by saying require Express, and we are going to include .env. And then we will also include cores. Okay, and we're also going to create a variable called app and set that equal to the function express. So now with app, we can say we can create our routes. Okay, so we can have a / route, and we can have a request response, and then we can just say response.text let's do hello world to make sure that it works. Our server is working. And then we'll do app.listen, and it's going to be process.env.server port, which is going to be 5000. And this takes in a callback, but okay, let's just console.log something. And we'll use an arrow function here. Sorry guys, can't type. Console.log server connected. Or let's not do connected, let's do running. Alright, so if I do nodemon app, and if I, let me close out of that, if I go to localhost 5000 / we should hit, okay, it did not hit it. Let's see. Let's make sure that I put in the right port. Okay, that I did. Oh, the reason why this isn't working is because we need to do .env.config so that we can access this server port. And there it goes. Our hello world is working. So we're going to have two routes here. I'm going to erase this. The first route is we are going to have a list which will just return our post data. And in there we're going to send request params, queries in the URL, where we return the how many posts we want from the database. Okay, and then the other one we're going to have is list count, which will return the complete count of how many posts there are stored in the table. All right, let's do this. Response.json success true. And let's just make sure this all works. We'll test it from our front end when we're ready for that. I'm going to close out of this .env. We don't need it. And now we can finally get started with our HTML. We worked backwards here. We started from the back end to the front. All right. I'm going to minimize this a little. Expand this. I'm going to do infinite scrolling. And I'm going to have a section here. All right, and I'm going to just say hi. I'm going to right click, open this with a live server. If you don't have that extension, you can download it here by typing in live server, and it's right here. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that is working. All right, so we're going to have a section with a class of post container. And we're going to link our CSS. So I'm going to do link colon CSS, and it'll link it for me. I called my file conveniently style.css. And then we're going to do the same thing with the script index.js. Okay, so we got those two things. And believe it or not, that's really it for our HTML. We're going to dynamically insert everything using JavaScript. Okay, so in our CSS, let's have some styling here. In the body, we're going to have a background color of 343434, and then our post container, we are going to have a background color of F7FF7. Okay, and we're going to add more CSS later for these cards. We'll come back and do that once we have the classes created. So now in our index.js, what we're going to do is we'll create a function called getPost. All right, so let's do one thing here, one thing at a time. So we're going to use the fetch API call. and I'm going to say HTTP localhost port 5000 list, and then we are going to add some params in our URL. So what we're going to do here is say question plus, and I'm just going to leave that as an empty string for now. We'll come back to that. All right, we're going to do that dot then. We'll have a response, convert that to JSON. And then we'll have another promise return with the data. And we're just going to console.log the data here. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this question mark. And let's call get post. All right. So we get an object back, which is success true, which means our backend is working and our connection from the front end to backend is working as well, which is awesome. All right, guys, so let's do the magic and get the database data. Let's get the data, the post data. So I'm going to create a new script here saying post. Let's do data. Let's do post service. All right, this service is going to just help us. It's just going to be helper functions that will help us get all the data we need. So we're going to say get post. All right, so I'm going to set a limit here. We're only going to want 10 posts at a time. This will take in a parameter called offset. So let me kind of just explain that here if you're confused. Let's do a sample query. Let's say we want only the first 10 posts. So we're going to do select from post where, sorry, not where. We're going to use limit 10. So if we do that, we'll only get the first 10 posts. But what if we want posts 11 through 20? Well, we need to use something. If we click on edit there, called offset. All right, so we can say offset we want till 20. So it'll do the limit plus 1, which will be 11 till 20. So as you can see here, I messed it up because this does not require a comma. And we get from 21 to 30 because I put in the wrong value. So offset will not be, if we want from 11 to 20, we'll say start at ID 10 plus 1, which will be 11. And then it'll set the limit to 20, and we'll get up from 11 to 20. So that's exactly what we're going to do here, but we need to send that data from our front end. Okay. So we'll get the offset, and we're going to do some parameter check here. So we're going to say if limit, and we're going to just say exclamation limit. If it's false, we're going to just set this equal to 0. So that means it'll start from, that means we should get limit 10, offset 0, should start from 1 to 10. Yep. And that means that we always just get some data back. We don't want to have a database error while inserting, while making a query to the backend. So now if limit, sorry, not limit, if offset, sorry about that, guys. We got to protect our function here from offset if in case it's null or undefined, or if it's not even a number. And if it's, we want to protect our function parameter offset here in case it's null or undefined. We could go even further to make sure that it's just a number and not a string, but we'll let that be. All right, so now we can make a fetch call. sorry, we're not, this is the backend. We're not making a fetch call. We are going to require MySQL. Sorry, not MySQL, DB. Require DB. All right, so we can say const DB instance equal to db.get DB instance, and then const connection equal to DB instance dot connection. We can say connection dot query. So I'm going to make this function async because we want to await the data from the query, from the database. So we're going to say const response equal to await. In order to get something returned to the variable, I'm going to create a promise here. Okay. I'm using a promise so that something gets returned back to response and I'm not just stuck in a callback function, because I need this data to be returned here, which will be a promise since we're using async await. Okay, so we're going to have reject resolve reject. All right, so in the query, let's create a variable. Select, let's do title, comma body from post limit, and limit is actually always going to be 10, so there's no point of even having that constant. And then what we're going to do is say if offset, actually we're just going to add an offset because either way it'll always be a valid thing here. So offset plus, and we need a space here, it'll be an offset number. Okay, so if we insert this query here and then have a callback, we can say error and results. Okay, so we're going to say if error, we'll just console.log this for now. Otherwise, we'll just, oh, I'm sorry, we're not going to console.log. We're going to use the promise here to reject it. And otherwise, we'll just do resolve results. Okay, now I'm going to console.log response and see what that is. All right, so I'm going to include the post server script here. Let's add a couple things here. So I'm going to set app.use. I'm going to set cores here, and app.use express.json. And funny thing is, I usually have, oh, and this should be a function call. I always have to use cores in order to make a call to the backend using fetch API, but usually I get a cores error. I'm sure many of you have run into that, but for some reason it worked this time. I'll need to look into that. Express.json is actually not required in this instance because we're not sending any data, we're just getting it. So I'm going to remove both of these. Just ignore I even added this. Okay, so we're going to include our post service file. So we're going to say, really, we're just returning a function. So you know what I'm going to do is if we return another function, we're just going to send an object back. So we're going to say post service is equal to post require post service. Okay, so I can get rid of this, and I'm going to say post service dot get post, and this should return a promise. So let's see. Okay, let's see. DB instance.connection is not a function. Oh, yeah. This is called get connection. So are we getting, yep, we're getting a promise here, which is what we wanted. So I'm going to get rid of the console.log, and we are going to say const response. Okay, so now we get a promise returned. So all we're going to do here is say response.then, and then we're going to get some data, and we're just going to response.json return that data. Shall we check it out now? Oh, looks like there's another error. Oh, whoa, what am I doing? Not, okay, can't call this response. Gotta call this data. Okay, so what I did here is I console.log the post data from here, get post, and it's an array. So in order to send it back as JSON format, we need to access the array. And now we can say response.json. We should get back, but we're still getting an error, it seems. All right, guys, so remember when I got rid of cores? Well, I actually do need this because this is where I run into the issue. So I'm going to do app.use express dot, oh, sorry, not express, just course. And also we're going to be using app.use express.json. Oh, and we need to include cores back here. All right, so we finally got the data back that we wanted. So as you can see here, okay, so if we return post here, we'll get the data we want, which is the 10 post. All right, so for now, that is fantastic. So now let's go into our index.js in our front end. Okay, so in our index.js, we're going to have another function now that will be loading the data, load post into a section. And this is going to take the post, and this will be an array. All right, so I'm going to call the function load post into section, passed in the data. All right, so we're going to loop through this. So we're going to say post array.forEach function. And we probably want to be, okay, we can leave out any, we could add, okay, so now we want to loop through this using forEach. We'll have a callback function, and in here we'll say post, and we'll also add the index in case we need it. All right, so now we're going to be loading this into our section, which we called post container. Okay, so we're going to create a variable here called let HTML equal to empty string. HTML will equal to double quote, and for this sake of the tutorial, we're just going to use template string to make it faster. So I'm going to have a div. All right, so I'm going to have an open and closing div. Probably don't need template string for that, but that's all right. So here, going to have a class of post-card, post-card, and then we're going to have a data-id of index +1. We actually don't even need that. Yeah, I don't see why we would need that. So template string. So inside here, we want to show the, oh, we do need that. we want to show the number. So in fact, instead of using the index here, let's just get the whole data from the database through select star. So using select star, we can say that we're going to have a header with a class of post header, HTML plus equal. We could probably convert these back into double string, but that's all right. So in here we'll have a h3, and we're gonna show post.id period post.title. Okay, so that's our h3, and then we are going to close the header, and then we're going to have a p tag. And we can do that, and inside the p tag we're going to have a class of post-body in case we need to change any of the CSS. So here we're going to just say post.body, and that's it. That's the HTML that we're going to have. And now what we're going to do is say document.querySelector. We are going to grab the post container, and we're going to use something called insert adjacent HTML. Okay, so this has 4 options that you can have: before, end. Okay, so that means each time we insert a post in here, it'll insert it right at the end of this section. If there's any content in here, if there's any divs in here, it will insert it after that at the very end, which is exactly what we want to do. And then we're going to have HTML. Oh man, okay. Okay, I can't type. And needed to add the period here. All right, so we're getting our data finally. I know that's like a long time before we even start the scrolling effect, but I swear it'll be worth it. Okay, so we need to add some CSS here. So we can say post-card background color of A2, A7, A5. Save that. Give this a box shadow of 2 pixels, 4 pixels, 16, 0 of, let's do 0.2. Okay, and in the container, let's add some padding. All right, and let's also add some width of 90%, and margin, add some margin of 0 auto. And in the postcard, let's add some, okay, let's do one thing. Let's do the header. We gave the header a class name of something, post header. Let's get rid of the margin that comes with the H3s. Okay, and then in here we'll add some padding of, let's say, 5 pixels. Okay, and then let's add some margin top of 10 pixels. Okay, all right. I'm going to add just a little bit more. All right, that looks decently well. And yeah, all right, and that's it, I would say. So now let's start for the fun functionality of getting the scroll to work. So window, okay, so we're going to have a window object, right? So we're going to say window dot on scroll. And we're going to set this equal to a function. Okay, so this on scroll is an event that gets triggered every time you scroll up or down, and even the tiniest bit, it'll get you something. It'll call this function basically. All right. Okay. So we want to check for a couple things here. I'm going to do my best to explain this. So let's see, we have the window object here. So we have something called the inner height, which is the height from here to the bottom of the window. So okay, so as I decrease this, the height increases. So we have the inner height, and then we also have the page Y offset, which means that how far the scroll is from the top. So you saw it was 1.6, right? Now it should be 0. If I'm at the bottom, it will be this. So these two combined should be greater than or equal to the document.body scroll height. Okay? If that is true, if these two are greater than or equal to this, then that means we're near the bottom. It doesn't mean we're exactly at the bottom, but we are near the bottom and we're ready to get more data. All right, so what we can do here is, so we have, since have the window object, we can access the properties with this, this keyword. So we can say if this, that inner height, and plus this dot page Y offset is greater than or equal to document.body dot scroll height. This is where we do all the magic, all right? So this get post needs to take in a parameter called offset, okay? And this offset will be something like this. Question mark offset equal to offset. So now we can access this variable in our backend, and we'll do that in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to have a guard here saying if offset is undefined or null, we'll just simply set this equal to 0. Same guard we have in our backend, so we still get our data, because from here we're not passing in anything. So what we want to do is say get post. So we want to say get post, and now the offset. Okay, the offset is going to be what we get. We need to see how many posts there already exist in the DOM. So one way we can do that is saying document.querySelector all, selector all, and we gave a class of postcard, right? Okay, and we can set this equal to a variable just for now. Let's do let postcard elements. Okay. So if we have, we'll get the count. Okay. So we can say postcard elements dot length. If we get the length there, we can say that we have 10 posts already. So that is exactly what we want. And I'm going to just say post length and do dot length here. This is unnecessary. Post length. Okay. So as you can see, it's starting to work. We're just getting the wrong data, or we're not getting the correct data. All right, so let's see what's going on here. We should get post length of 10, but the Okay, so we're getting the post length of 10. So if that means it's going to start from 11 on. Let's see if there's something messing up in the back end. Yeah, because we're just, we have the default at 0, right, in this our post service. So what we need to do here is say, so we can console.log request.query. So you guys can see, there we go, we get that. And if we scroll down, we get 10. Okay. So we can say const offset is equal to request.query.offset. Perfect. And we can just pass it here. All right, so we get the offset. We should get now 11 to 20. Perfect. Now see, it's going to mess up the count here because the scroll gets triggered multiple times. So if it gets triggered once, we need to lock it down to where it doesn't get triggered again until the data is loaded. So what we can do, we can have a global variable here saying scroll lock. Okay, and set that equal to false. As soon as we enter this if statement, we can say scroll lock is equal to true. And then we can, up here, we can say if scroll lock is true, we're just going to return. All right, so now we can do that. And we got it. Oh, we need to reset it. We can reset it. Let's see. Let's reset it here. Scroll lock is equal to false. Okay. Yep. It's going. Yep, infinite scrolling is working. It'll go all the way up to 100 because that's how much data we have. So there's infinite scrolling. I did want to add one more thing here, which is a loading text. You can add a loading bar, which kind of goes back and forth, letting the user know that something's loading. So let's implement that. That shouldn't take too long. We are going to have two functions here that will create and destroy the loading text. So let's have create loading element. So we're going to say let p equal to document dot create. Let's see, what is it? Element p. And then we're going to say p dot inner text is equal to loading. Okay, and then we're gonna get that, and we can just insert it here into the bottom of at the very bottom of the post container. Post container dot insert a JSON element, because this is not an HTML string. This is just an actual element that we created. So we're going to say before end and p. Okay, so where we're going to create that is when we call get post. So when we call get post, we can just say create loading element. And here we have it there. Let's not add this. Okay. So let's add, okay, so we have our create loading element. Let's add create loading element in right before we insert this document right here. And we are going to destroy it after it is inserted. So we can say function, yeah, destroy, I guess. loading element, or we can use remove, whatever it is, and we can just say, and we need to add a class here, p.classList.add. We can say loading element. Okay, loading element. And we can just say dot remove. And then we will insert that right here. So destroy loading element. Okay, so let's see how this works. It's going too fast. What we're going to do is we're going to use set timeout to further delay this. So we're going to do function, and we'll just have a 2-second waiting period. And we're going to put all this code in here, and this as well in here, and as well as the scroll lock. Okay, so you guys should be able to witness the loading. There we go. And just like I showed you guys in the brief demo, this is exactly working how we want it to. So that's it, guys. I know this was kind of long just to get to the scrolling, but I hope it was worth it. And if you guys gained something out of this or learned something, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.